In this video I'd like to show you how I create a typical pictures to exit show where I animate using rotations, pans and zooms the images within the show. Now I've started here with a complete show. I've actually created a show using those large, slightly larger images that we created in a previous video. Okay, and they've been populated in here. They've been brought down into the timeline. I've sorted them out, I've sequenced them. If we go to slides, go to our light table here, you can see that I've put them into this order here. Okay, you can see the different transition times, the different durations of each slide. So all of those slides are in the show. Go back to our timeline and you can see we've got the audio track here. Move to the end and you can see the last slide fades out to a blank slide and the music track ends. Okay, and what I've tried to do is, as we go through the sequence, see we've got peak here. As it it changes, I've tried to get it so that the slides kind of change with the tempo, the beat of the music. And you can do that by looking at the track, the peaks of the track there, and dragging the slides to try and match each slide up with the track. Okay, so once you've organized your images, I then change the the scaling of the image to match the track below, so that the images kind of blend to the beat of the music. Okay. Most of the work that we do is within the objects and animations pane, and so that's where we'll be working. But let's just have a quick look at the beginning part of the sequence to see the sort of work that I've done. Now we could play it through the mini player here. Okay. So you can see we've got a panning kind of intro. We've got a still image kind of zooming within what's called a frame. We've got a video and we had a title going up, and then we fade into another image which is zooming, another and another. Okay, so this is the kind of effect, slight rotation. Okay, we could also have played it through here, the preview, which gives you a full screen display. Okay, so notice how the text is scrolling. We've got the bar at the bottom, which is an option in the in our project options if you wish to have that here. And by having this bar, I can actually select along the timeline. This is really only useful for demonstration purposes, so I'd normally have this option deselected. Okay, so you've got a fairly reasonable idea as to what I'm trying to achieve. So escape from there. We can move the cursor to the first image and go and have a look as to how I constructed that particular slide. Okay, so again we've got a timeline here and we can move our cursor along the timeline, and as I move it you can see the way the different objects, and we call these objects, within the window, they all change as the time progresses. And we can see what's going on here. If I select the top one, the bottom one, they all populate this timeline area here, and these little blue rectangles are what's called keyframes or key points, and they determine what is happening to a particular object along that timeline. So here in React 2016, I'll just move the cursor along here. Okay, so you can see that something is happening to React 2016 here, here, and here. So if we just move it to, so it looks like between there and there, the text becomes opaque. We can see it. So from there backwards, it's transparent. It comes to here, it starts to get visible. It continues scrolling up the screen. So we get to there, and it fades out. Okay, so these keyframes determine what is happening to that object as it moves along the timeline. And each object down here can behave in different ways. And we determine that by creating keyframes, adjusting the object, and then Pictures to Exe interprets this keyframe here, this keyframe here, and what it needs to do to change between the two. It creates that change automatically. Okay. We can move on to the next slide. Move it onto here, and we can see we've just got two keyframes here, at the beginning and the end. And you can see there's a difference in magnification between the beginning and the end. And if we just play that, go to the beginning, play that, you can see that Pictures to Exe knows that there's a difference between magnification here and here, and it will change gradually, automatically, between those keyframes. So if I was to try and recreate this, let's delete all of the objects within here. Press select the top one, select the bottom one. I'll delete them. So all the objects have been deleted. I'll move to the next slide, and we can delete object there, delete object there. Okay, so you get an idea. We can move through the sequence without actually leaving our objects and animations pane here. Okay. So we're in this slide here, and we can see the duration of the slide. Let's move to the end one. Oh, we're in the right. This is the slide. I was in the blank slide. So we can see the duration here is about 16.5 seconds. Okay, so there's nothing on that slide at the moment. This is our black background slide. I'm just going to zoom out to 25% and bring in our first image. Now there's the image, the panorama. So bring it in, and it fits to the slide. Now I don't want black areas showing, so there's sufficient pixels within this image to zoom it to there. And I'm going to drag this over here. So at the moment this keyframe here is highlighted. So at the beginning, when the slide show, when this particular slide opens, it will show this image in this position at this magnification here. If I right click on it, we can add a keyframe. It appears at the end of the timeline. What we can now do is we can move our image, maybe increase the size a little bit. Make sure that you cover the entire slide area. Okay, to there. So that keyframe there, I want this image to be slightly magnified and at the far right hand side. Now the magic of Pictures to Exe is it understands what it should be at the beginning, it understands what you want at the end, and it will change automatically the image in between. Okay, so if we select there, right click, so you can see it's panning the image and zooming in just a little bit up to there. Now we also had some text where for the title of the show. Let's just zoom into 50. Okay, so we had our slide selected here, that particular object, the image. We have a thing called parent and child relationships, and it's important to understand this, otherwise you can make a bit of a mess of your show. But say I wanted a bit of text here now, maybe to scroll the screen or just stay where it is. Okay. Select the text tool, and I'm going to call this child, because if we look down here, and I'll just put the name here, child, and that name there is what appears here. Okay. Because I had that image selected, the text has appeared as part of that image, and there it is here. I'll just drag that over here. Okay. So what happens if that object is a child of that other object, in this case an image? I'm just going to select play, and the text moves with that parent object, okay, which maybe isn't what you want. So in order to create a text that isn't a child of another object, we need to make sure that nothing is selected. Okay, so you don't see any handles around anything, and there's nothing selected within the objects pane here. Now if we select the text tool, we can just call this air display. Air display, or air display here. And now if you can see that it's appeared here, so it's not a child of anything. In fact, I'll put that down here. Just scale it a little bit. So that is down here now. Say I want the air display to scroll up the screen. What we can now do is we can just select the that, and we can create, right click, or if you look at the shortcut, it says insert. Okay, insert another keyframe, and that appears at the end of the timeline. Okay, so now if we move display up here, we could maybe make it a little bit bigger. So now let's play, go back to the beginning, move our cursor to the beginning, play. So air display now behaves independently of what that child object did. So it's increasing magnification as it scrolls up the screen. Okay. So say we want to add another image. So if you remember, we had a object here, another image. So I'm going to make sure that nothing is selected. We can just click the pasteboard here, select add image. Here we've got an image of the red arrows. Select open. We can now grab the handles, size it to what we want. If you remember, we had a video here as well, so I might want to try and align this with the video. We can do that through a grid effect here, and we can change the grid through these sliders here. Okay. So we can move things around like that if we need to. Let's just align that with that, and if we don't want the grid to show, let's just select it and get rid of it. Okay, so again, this is an object and it's within a frame, and you can see what's happened here. We've got a frame here, so that's a frame, and the image is within inside it. Okay. So if we want something to happen to this image, let's go to there. Say we want it to be invisible at the beginning. So we go to our animations pane. We make sure it's the opacity is 0, so it's invisible. We can clone the keyframe and look at we've got a shortcut for that, Alt Insert. I'm going to move that to round about there. Okay, Alt Insert. So now we can bring the opacity to 100. Okay, Alt Insert. Make sure it's selected when you do it. You need to make sure you actually click on the keyframe, and say we wanted this image to start disappearing round about here. Okay, so it's still visible, but maybe we want this the content to be zooming at the same time. So between here and here, let's zoom the contents. So we can do that in the framing here. Let's go to 200. So we can see we've got a kind of framing. We can move it around a little bit as well. Okay, clone keyframe, and it will disappear. Or maybe we could even blur it. We'll go to disappear. So there, I'll just select the top object, the bottom object, and we can see the relationship, the keyframes of all the objects we've created so far. Let's go back to the beginning, play. So our image should appear, there we go. And it's now kind of zooming within the keyframe. Okay, so there's the mask or the frame, and there's the image within it. It disappeared here. Okay, so let's try and bring in a video. Go to the beginning. Make sure that nothing is selected. We can go to our video, import video, find the video, air display, and there was a couple of videos that I added to the folder here. Open, and here's the video. Let's move it to here. To try and scale it to the same as that image there, I'll just move the timeline. We can then just move this over here and maybe just try and scale it to the same sort of size. Okay. If you really want to get critical about this, we could actually just type in here the zoom size, which is the same as the air display one. Oops. Okay, but anyhow, we'll go back to here and we'll just scale it something like that. Move it over here. Go to our visibility of the grid. Position it there. Okay. So now we have a video that can play. But what we'd like to do, maybe, I'll just bring back all those objects here. So this image here, let's go back to properties. I'll just call that movie. So it appears here as movie, so we can keep an eye on what's going on here. Select them all. Okay, so there's movie. We've got nothing done to it, so as we move the timeline down here, play, the movie's there right at the beginning, which probably isn't what we want. So we can do the same thing again. Select that, go to animation, opacity down to 0, clone keyframe. We'll put that maybe over here, so we can see that as we move the timeline, the image up there as just appearing. So maybe we want the movie to maybe start appearing about there. Let's go to 7, about 7 here. Okay. Clone keyframe. Make sure you select the actual keyframe. Opacity to 100. Clone keyframe. And maybe we want it to start fading out at the same time as that other image here. Okay. Clone keyframe. Down to 0 opacity. Okay. So let's see what happens now. Move to the beginning. Now we can hear the movie playing in the background. So the movie has actually started and it's stopped here. So what is happening is the movie is starting to play here when it's invisible. So what we want to do is try and move the movie so it starts playing round about here. Okay, and we can do that through properties. Make sure we select the actual object. Okay, and we can adjust the offset of the movie. So I'm just going to select in here. So about 7 seconds. So hopefully the movie will start playing about 7 seconds into the track, which is when it starts to fade in. So now let's go back to here. We should start to hear the movie around about here when it starts fading in. There we go. So things are starting to come together now. It fades out. Okay. So that is how we can assemble a fairly complicated slide using all of these tools here. Okay. So now if we want to move on to the next slide and do a little bit of work on the next slide, all we've got to do is go to here, move to the next slide. Okay, we've got one keyframe here. If we want this to maybe zoom in as we move across, it's only a 6 seconds slide here. I'm going to right click here, clone keyframe, or we could just add a keyframe to here, and we can zoom. Maybe something like that. So now if we play, move on to the next slide, can insert, press insert, a new keyframe appears at the end. Okay, play that. And we just keep on going through the images, creating effects like this. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a brief overview as to how we create keyframes and how we create animation associated with each of these keyframes. In the next video, I'd just like to show you the difference between cloning the keyframe and inserting the keyframe and how that changes the way things operate.